The words hit me like a freight train. "Kai, I can't keep doing this in the shadows anymore," Leonardo said. His voice steady but his eyes pleading as we sat across from each other in our favorite Italian bistro in downtown Chicago on a warm summer evening. "It's either we tell the world about us or I have to walk away. I love you too much to live a lie any longer." I stared at him, the candlelight flickering between us, my fork frozen midway to my mouth. 3 years of stolen moments, whispered promises, and careful discretion flashed before my eyes. We had met at a mutual friend's birthday party 3 years ago, two guys who bonded over bad coffee and shared laughs about corporate life and teaching high school kids. Leonardo, with his warm brown eyes, dark hair, and easy smile, had been the one to make the first move, asking me out for coffee the next day. From that night on, we were inseparable in private. But publicly, I was just Kai Thompson, the ambitious marketing coordinator from a conservative family in the suburbs of Chicago, and he was Leo Ramirez, the popular history teacher at a local high school. No one knew the truth, not my parents, not my siblings, not even my closest co-workers at the advertising firm. The fear of their judgment had kept me silent. But now Leonardo was forcing the issue on our anniversary. I don't know if I can," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the restaurant's soft jazz music playing in the background. The thought of losing him sent a sharp pain through my chest, making it hard to breathe. He reached across the table, his hand brushing mine briefly before pulling back, aware of the other diners around us who were laughing and chatting without a care. "Think about it, Kai. We've talked about this for months. I'm not asking for a parade or anything dramatic, just for us to stop hiding. No more separate vacations or pretending we're just roommates when friends visit. If we can't do this together, then maybe we're not meant to be." His words hung in the air like a challenge, and in that moment, something shifted inside me. The internal battle I'd fought for so long, the shame from my strict upbringing in a religious household, the worry about my career advancement in a competitive field, the deep love I felt for this man who had brought so much light into my life, all collided in a whirlwind of emotions. By the time we left the restaurant, walking side by side but not holding hands as we always did in public, I had made my decision. "Okay," I said quietly as we reached my apartment building in the trendy Lincoln Park neighborhood. "I'll do it. We'll come out. Together." Leonardo's face lit up with a mix of relief and love, pulling me into a quick hug in the shadow of the doorway where no one could see. But as I lay in bed that night, alone after he left to his own place, the reality began to sink in. What had I just agreed to? The next morning, I woke with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I called my best friend, Marcus, and asked him to meet for coffee at our usual spot downtown. He was the first person I would tell, a test run before the bigger revelations to come. Over lattes at the cozy cafe, I stumbled through the words. "Marcus, there's something I've been keeping from you for a long time. I'm gay, and I've been seeing Leonardo for 3 years now." His eyes widened in surprise, then softened with understanding. "Wait, the Leonardo from the party a few years back? Dude, why didn't you say anything sooner? That's huge, but I'm glad you told me." His reaction was better than I expected, though there was a hint of hurt in his voice for the long secrecy. We talked for hours, him asking questions about how we met and why I hid it, me explaining the fear of rejection from family and the pressure I felt to fit the mold they had set for me. By the end of the conversation, he hugged me and said he supported me 100%, even offering to be there when I told others. It was a small victory, but it gave me the hope I needed to move forward. Emboldened by Marcus's support, I decided to tell my sister next, texting her to meet for lunch the following day. But as the day wore on at work, doubts crept back into my mind while I sat in meetings discussing campaign strategies. My family was traditional, church-going folks who had raised me with certain expectations of marriage and grandchildren. Coming out could shatter that image they had of me. Leonardo texted me throughout the day, sending encouraging words and memes that helped lighten the load, but the weight was mine to carry. As the week progressed, I planned how to approach my parents. A Sunday dinner at their house seemed the way, but the thought made my hands shake every time I thought about it. Leonardo offered to be there with me, but I knew I had to do this part alone first to own it. The days blurred into a mix of anxiety and determination as I threw myself into work, pitching campaigns that subtly reflected diversity and inclusion, testing the waters at the office without revealing too much. My boss praised my creativity, unaware of the personal motivation behind it. But at night, the conversations with Leonardo grew deeper and more intimate as we discussed what coming out meant for our future. Moving in together openly, attending family events as a couple, facing potential backlash from friends or colleagues. "It's not going to be easy," he warned one evening over Chinese takeout in his apartment. "But we'll face it together. That's what love is about, Kai." His words reinforced my choice, yet the internal conflict raged on inside me. Was I ready for the stares, the questions, the possible rejection that could change everything? The story of my life had always been about fitting in, succeeding quietly without drawing attention. Now it was time to rewrite it completely. As I prepared for the family dinner, I rehearsed the words in the mirror over and over. "Mom, Dad, I'm gay. And Leonardo is my boyfriend." It sounded so simple, but the implications were massive. Leonardo waited in his car nearby for moral support after I was done. When I arrived at my parents' house in the quiet suburbs, the familiar smell of home-cooked roast beef and potatoes filled the air, bringing back childhood memories. My sister was there too, already knowing from my earlier call and offering silent encouragement with her eyes. Dinner conversation started light, talking about work and the weather, but I could feel the tension building in my chest. Finally, after dessert, I cleared my throat and said, "There's something I need to tell you all." The room fell silent as I spoke the words, my voice trembling at first but gaining strength with each sentence. My mother's face paled, her hands clutching the napkin. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "Gay? With that teacher guy?" Dad's voice was low and dangerous. "After all we've done for you, sending you to good schools and raising you right?" The argument that followed was intense, accusations flying about disappointment, lifestyle choices, and what the neighbors and church community would say. My sister tried to mediate, reminding them that I was still the same person, but it ended with Dad storming out to the garage. Mom cried quietly at the table, asking why I hadn't trusted them sooner. I left feeling raw and exposed, but strangely free for the first time in years. Leonardo was waiting in the car, and as I fell into his arms in the parking lot, the first tears came. "It's done," I said through sobs. "Now what?" He held me tight, whispering, "Now we live, Kai. Really live for the first time." But the fallout was just beginning, and I had no idea how much it would test us both. The phone calls started the very next morning. My brother from out of state left a voicemail full of confusion and anger, asking if this was some kind of phase or if I was sure. "You've always been the golden boy, Kai. What happened?" He didn't understand, and the conversation when I finally called back ended with him hanging up after I tried to explain that this was who I had always been. Not a choice but my truth. At work, the whispers started when Marcus accidentally let it slip to a mutual colleague during lunch. Suddenly, my colleagues looked at me differently, some with curiosity, others with uncomfortable smiles that made meetings feel longer than usual. My boss pulled me into his office later that afternoon, not to fire me, but to ask if I needed any support or time off, which was a relief but also highlighted how my personal life was now office gossip. Leonardo and I spent the evening talking about how to handle it all, his patience helping me through the dark moments when doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest. But then came the bigger challenge, telling Leonardo's family. Unlike mine, his parents were more open, having suspected for years. When we drove to their house in the suburbs the following weekend and told them over a simple dinner of homemade enchiladas, his mom hugged me warmly, saying she was happy Leo had found someone like me who made him smile the way he did. His dad clapped me on the back, joking about grandkids in other ways like adopting or fostering. It was a stark contrast that made me envious and grateful at the same time, showing me that acceptance could look different in different homes. Yet, the misunderstandings began when my mother called the next day, asking if I could keep it quiet for the family reunion next month. "For your father's sake," she pleaded, her voice cracking. The pressure mounted, and I felt torn between my love for Leonardo and the guilt toward my family that had raised me with so much care, even if it came with conditions I could no longer meet. One night, after a particularly heated discussion with my sister about how my coming out was affecting her relationship with our parents, I broke down in front of Leonardo in his living room. "Maybe I should have stayed silent," I confessed, the words tasting bitter. He looked hurt for a split second, but instead of arguing, he suggested we take a walk in the park nearby. There, under the stars with the city lights twinkling in the distance, he reminded me of why we started this journey together. "The choice was yours, Kai, and I'm proud of you for making it. But if it's too much right now, we can figure it out step by step." His support was unwavering, but the internal crisis deepened as I questioned everything I thought I knew about myself and the world around me. The story continued with more small conflicts, like when a friend from college posted a photo of us together on social media without realizing the implications, forcing me to deal with online comments from old acquaintances who suddenly remembered me differently. The emotional toll was real, but so was the quiet growth I felt in accepting myself a little more each day. As weeks turned into months, I started seeing a therapist recommended by Marcus to process the trauma of the family rejection. Learning tools to handle the prejudice I encountered at a company event, where a client made a subtle homophobic remark about modern lifestyles. Leonardo stood by me through every meeting, every call. His presence a constant reminder of the happiness we could have if we kept choosing each other. But the real high point was approaching as we decided to move in together publicly, inviting friends to a housewarming that served as our official announcement to the world. The reactions were mixed, some friends celebrating with hugs and toasts, others distancing themselves with awkward excuses, revealing who was true and who had only been there for the surface version of me. Through it all, our bond strengthened in ways I never imagined, teaching me that love wasn't about perfection, but about choosing each other every single day despite the world trying to pull us apart. The housewarming party marked the first time we stood together as a couple in front of everyone we knew. Friends from work, old college buddies, and a few of Leonardo's teaching colleagues filled our new apartment in Wicker Park, the smell of grilled burgers and fresh salsa mixing with laughter that felt both liberating and terrifying. I kept glancing at Leonardo, his hand resting lightly on my lower back now that hiding was no longer an option, and every time our eyes met he gave me that small reassuring smile that had gotten me through the past month. Marcus showed up with a bottle of wine and a hug that lasted longer than usual, whispering, "You did it, man. Proud of you." But not everyone was as supportive. One of my cousins from the family group chat sent a text midway through the night saying my dad was still processing, and maybe I should have waited. The words stung, but Leonardo pulled me aside into the kitchen, closed the door, and reminded me that processing was their journey, not mine to carry alone. The next morning, with empty cups and leftover chips scattered everywhere, we sat on the couch in the quiet aftermath and talked about what came next. Leonardo wanted to take a trip to California to visit his aunt who had always been an ally, a chance to breathe outside Chicago's familiar pressures. I agreed, but the thought of leaving my family behind even for a week made my stomach twist. At work the following Monday, the atmosphere had shifted again. A senior account manager who had always been friendly now avoided eye contact in the hallway, and when I pitched a new campaign featuring inclusive family imagery, the room went quiet for a beat too long before my boss nodded approval. Small things, but they added up. That evening Leonardo cooked his mom's enchilada recipe to cheer me up, and over dinner we laughed about the party disasters. The spilled salsa, the awkward small talk, but underneath it all I could feel the cracks forming. My sister called the next day to say Mom had been crying again at church, asking the pastor for prayers for our family. The guilt hit hard, and for the first time I wondered if my decision had been selfish. Leonardo listened without interrupting, then said softly, "You're allowed to live your life, Kai. They're allowed to feel whatever they feel. But we don't have to shrink ourselves to make them comfortable. His words helped. Yet the internal war continued late into the night as I stared at the ceiling replaying every family dinner, every holiday where I had smiled and pretended. The following weekend, we drove to Leonardo's parents' house for a barbecue. His dad grilled steaks while his mom asked about our new place, treating me like I had always been part of the family. It was easy, natural, and for a few hours I forgot the storm waiting back home. But on the drive back, my phone buzzed with a message from my brother. Dad says he needs time. Maybe don't bring Leo to the reunion. The message felt like a door slamming. Leonardo saw my face and pulled the car over on the side of the highway, letting me vent until the anger turned to tears. I hate that my happiness hurts them, I admitted. He wiped my cheek and said, Your happiness doesn't hurt them. Their expectations do. We sat there in the car for almost an hour, the city lights beginning to glow as evening fell, and in that moment I realized the journey wasn't just about coming out once. It was about choosing to stay out every single day. The weeks that followed brought more tests. At work, a big client meeting turned tense when the client asked if I was the gay guy from the team in front of everyone. My boss stepped in smoothly, but the comment lingered. Leonardo dealt with his own challenges when a parent at his school complained about inappropriate role models, forcing him to meet with the principal. We supported each other through late-night talks and quiet mornings where words weren't needed. One night, after a particularly hard day, we lay on the couch watching an old movie, and Leonardo turned to me and said, I never wanted to force you, Kai. I just didn't want to lose you to fear. I pulled him closer, understanding for the first time how much courage it had taken for him to give me the ultimatum. The misunderstanding with my family deepened when my mother sent a long email listing Bible verses and asking if I had considered counseling. I read it 3 times before showing Leonardo. Instead of anger, he suggested we write back together, calmly explaining that this wasn't something to fix. The reply we crafted took hours, but sending it felt like another step toward freedom. Slowly, friends who had drifted began reaching out again. Some genuinely curious, others testing the waters. Marcus organized a game night at our place, and for the first time the apartment felt like home with people who knew the real us. Yet the emotional journey kept twisting. I started journaling late at night, pouring out the fear, the love, the anger, and the hope. Leonardo respected the space, sometimes leaving me notes on the fridge that simply said, I'm here. As summer turned to fall, the leaves changing outside our windows mirrored the changes inside me. I was no longer the man who hid. I was becoming the man who stood tall, even if my knees still shook sometimes. The real test was still coming, but for now, in the quiet evenings with Leonardo's head on my shoulder, I felt the first real glimpses of peace. The email from my mother sat in my inbox for 3 days before I could open it again. Leonardo had gone to school early for parent-teacher conferences, leaving me alone with the words that felt like another ultimatum. We love you, Kai, but we need time. Please understand this isn't easy for us. I read it aloud to the empty kitchen, my voice cracking on the last sentence. When Leonardo came home that afternoon carrying a bag of groceries, he found me on the couch staring at my phone. Without a word, he set the bags down, sat beside me, and waited until I was ready to speak. They still think it's a phase, I finally said. He nodded, then suggested we take the weekend and drive up to Wisconsin for some fresh air. The cabin we rented was small and quiet, surrounded by trees turning gold and red. We hiked during the day, talked about everything except my family at night, and slowly the knot in my chest loosened. On the last evening, sitting by the fire pit, Leonardo turned to me and said, I know the cost has been high. If you ever need to step back, I'll understand. The offer surprised me, but it also showed how much he cared. Back in Chicago, the pressure at work intensified when a major client pulled out of a campaign after learning about my relationship through office gossip. My boss called me in not to blame me, but to say the company would stand behind me. Still, the lost account meant overtime and tighter deadlines. Leonardo's school situation worsened too when the principal asked him to keep a low profile at the upcoming open house. We leaned on each other more than ever, cooking simple meals together and taking long walks along the lakefront where the wind off Lake Michigan cleared our heads. One Saturday, Marcus invited us to a barbecue with a group of his friends, some of whom were gay themselves. For the first time in months, I felt normal, laughing, arguing about sports, planning a group trip. On the drive home, Leonardo squeezed my hand and said, "See, the world is bigger than your parents' dining room." The words stayed with me, but the next week brought another blow. My sister texted that Dad had refused to attend her birthday dinner if I brought Leonardo. The rejection stung like salt in an open wound. I spent the evening pacing the apartment until Leonardo gently took my phone and suggested we send flowers instead with a simple note. The gesture felt small, but it was something. Therapy sessions became my anchor. My therapist, Dr. Elena, helped me see that my family's reaction was about their fears, not my worth. She gave me exercises to separate their disappointment from my identity. Leonardo attended one session with me, and hearing him describe how proud he was of my courage made tears well up. As October arrived with its crisp air and pumpkin spice everything, we decided to host a small Halloween party. Costumes, music, friends, a chance to celebrate us. My sister surprised everyone by showing up anyway, hugging me tightly at the door and whispering, "I'm trying, Kai. Give me time." Her presence meant more than she knew. But the night wasn't without tension. One of Leonardo's colleagues made a careless joke about the gay agenda, and I watched Leonardo's jaw tighten before he changed the subject smoothly. Later, in the quiet after everyone left, we talked about how exhaustion was setting in. "I'm tired of proving we deserve to exist," I admitted. He rested his forehead against mine and replied, "Then stop proving. Just be." The simple advice felt revolutionary. The following weekend, we visited his family again. His mom pulled me aside in the kitchen and said, "You're good for him, Kai. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." The acceptance from his side contrasted sharply with the silence from mine, creating a new kind of internal conflict. I started writing letters I never sent, to my dad, to my mom, to the version of myself who had stayed hidden for so long. Leonardo found one by accident, and instead of getting upset, he asked if I wanted to read it together. Sharing those raw words brought us closer. As November approached with its holiday commercials and family expectations, the dread grew. My mother called once, her voice hesitant, asking if I would still come for Thanksgiving alone. I told her no, that Leonardo and I had plans together. The call ended awkwardly, but I didn't regret it. That night we booked tickets to visit Leonardo's aunt in San Diego for the holiday, a small act of choosing our own tradition. The emotional journey kept revealing layers I never expected. I found myself volunteering at a local LGBTQ center on weekends, helping with youth programs, and the gratitude in those kids' eyes reminded me why coming out mattered. Leonardo joined me one Saturday, and watching him connect with a teenager struggling with his own identity felt like the full circle we had been moving toward. Yet the misunderstandings with my family continued. My brother sent a long message listing concerns about the lifestyle, and I spent hours crafting a reply that was honest without being defensive. Leonardo read it before I hit send and simply said, "You're stronger than you know." The weeks blurred into a rhythm of work, therapy, small victories, and quiet nights where we held each other a little tighter. The crisis was building, but so was the strength we were discovering together. Thanksgiving in San Diego felt like stepping into a different world. Leonardo's aunt had a house overlooking the ocean, and the table was filled with laughter, stories, and no hidden glances. For 4 days we walked on the beach, ate too much pie, and slept without alarms. On the plane ride home, I told Leonardo, "I needed this more than I realized." He smiled and said the same. But Chicago greeted us with reality. The week after the holiday, my boss called me into a meeting with HR. A client had complained about discomfort working with me after seeing a social media post from the housewarming. The company offered to reassign accounts, but the message was clear. My visibility had a cost. I left the meeting numb. Leonardo met me for lunch, listened, and then suggested we look at other opportunities together. The idea of changing jobs scared me, but the alternative felt worse. That evening, we updated our resumes side by side at the kitchen table, turning fear into action. The betrayal came 2 days later when a colleague I had considered a friend leaked an old photo of Leonardo and me to a conservative blog that targeted local businesses. The article was small but vicious, questioning our agenda at the firm. Comments poured in. My phone buzzed nonstop. Leonardo's school faced calls from parents demanding answers. We spent the night fielding messages and deciding how to respond publicly. Instead of hiding, we wrote a joint statement on social media simply saying, "We are two men in love living openly." That's all. The support that followed from unexpected places, former classmates, distant relatives, strangers, surprised us. My sister texted, "I saw it. I'm sorry it's like this." Even my mother sent a short message, "Be safe." Small cracks of light in the darkness. Work became tense. Some colleagues avoided me, others offered quiet solidarity. I started interviewing at other agencies, and one downtown firm seemed genuinely excited about my portfolio and my story. Leonardo faced his own battle when the school board scheduled a special meeting. He prepared a speech about inclusion and the importance of role models. I sat in the audience that night, heart pounding, as he stood at the podium and spoke with quiet dignity. The board voted to support him, but the experience left scars. The weeks leading to Christmas brought new pressures. My family invited me to the annual gathering but made it clear Leonardo wasn't welcome. After long talks with him and my therapist, I decided to skip it entirely and instead host a small dinner with friends who had become our chosen family. The night was filled with laughter, board games, and a toast to the year we had survived. Leonardo and I exchanged simple gifts. A watch for him, a journal for me, and in the quiet after everyone left we talked about the future. "I want to marry you someday," he said softly. The words hung between us, full of hope and possibility. But the new year started with another blow. My father sent a letter through my sister asking me to reconsider my choices for the sake of the family name. Reading it felt like a punch. Leonardo held me while I cried, then suggested we frame it as the last chapter of an old story. We burned the letter in a small ceremony in our backyard, watching the ashes scatter in the wind. The symbolic act helped more than I expected. As winter turned to spring, I accepted the new job offer. The first day at the new agency felt like a fresh start. Colleagues who celebrated diversity, projects that mattered. Leonardo's school year ended with students writing him thank you notes for being open. The emotional journey had taken us through fire, but we were emerging stronger. Misunderstandings still happened. An old friend who unfollowed us, a neighbor who stared too long, but they hurt less each time. One weekend we drove to Michigan for a pride event, marching hand in hand for the first time in daylight. The energy, the cheers, the sense of belonging filled something I hadn't known was empty. Back home we talked about adopting a dog, maybe starting a small tradition of Sunday brunches. Life was beginning to feel normal in the best way. Yet I knew the road wasn't finished. My mother's birthday was approaching, and the invitation came with a note saying Dad was still struggling but trying. Leonardo encouraged me to go alone if I needed to, but I asked him to come anyway. The dinner was tense at first, conversation careful, but my sister kept things light. When we left that night, my mother hugged me, really hugged me, for the first time in months. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was movement. The sacrifice had been real, the pain deep, but the growth was undeniable. Leonardo and I stood on our balcony that night looking at the city lights, and for the first time I believed we would make it through anything together. The journey had changed us both, and I was ready for whatever came next. Spring brought longer days and new challenges. The new job demanded travel, and Leonardo's summer break meant he could join me on some trips. We spent a week in New York for a conference, walking through Central Park holding hands without looking over our shoulders. The freedom felt intoxicating. But back in Chicago, the family situation reached a breaking point when my father had a minor health scare. My mother called in tears asking me to come to the hospital. I went alone first, sitting by his bed while he slept. When he woke, the conversation was short and painful. "I don't understand it, Kai, but I don't want to lose you." The words were a start, but they came with conditions I wasn't willing to meet. Leonardo waited in the lobby, and when I told him what happened, he simply said, "One step at a time." The misunderstanding escalated when my brother organized a family intervention without telling me. I walked into my parents' living room to find everyone seated like a tribunal. Accusations flew: selfishness, betrayal, sin. I listened until I couldn't, then stood and said, "I love you all, but I won't apologize for who I am." Leonardo picked me up afterward, and we drove in silence until I finally spoke. "I think I need space from them for a while." He nodded, understanding the sacrifice I was making. The decision hurt, but it also brought relief. Work offered a promotion that required moving to the firm's Denver office for 6 months. Leonardo and I talked late into the night about whether to go together. He had his teaching contract, but the idea of a fresh start appealed to both of us. In the end, we decided he would join me on weekends and we would make it work. The temporary separation tested us more than anything before. Video calls became our lifeline, but the distance magnified every argument. One night after a long day, I snapped at him over something small, and he hung up. The silence lasted 2 days before I flew home unannounced and showed up at his door with flowers and an apology. We spent the weekend talking through the cracks that had formed, emerging closer than before. Back in Denver, I started volunteering at a local youth center, sharing my story with teenagers who needed to hear it. Leonardo visited and led a workshop on history and identity. Watching him connect with those kids reminded me why we had fought so hard. The betrayal that nearly broke us came from an unexpected source. A former colleague who posted old messages online trying to paint our relationship as unprofessional. The story gained traction locally, and for a week we were back in damage control. Leonardo's school even received renewed complaints. We responded with facts and dignity, and slowly the noise died down. The experience taught us both about resilience. As summer ended and my Denver assignment wrapped, I returned to Chicago with a clearer sense of self. Leonardo met me at the airport with a sign that simply read, "Welcome home, love." The reunion felt like the first real breath after holding it for months. We decided to adopt a rescue dog named Max, a small act of building our future. Family contact remained minimal. My sister visited occasionally, bringing updates and trying to bridge the gap. My mother sent birthday cards with short notes. Dad stayed silent. The sacrifice of distance weighed on me, but Leonardo helped me see it as protecting our peace. One evening in early fall, we attended a friend's wedding where same-sex marriage had been legal for years. Watching the couple exchange vows brought tears to my eyes. On the drive home, Leonardo asked if I could see us doing the same someday. I said yes without hesitation. The emotional journey had taken us through every kind of storm, but we had learned to sail together. Misunderstandings still surfaced. A neighbor's comment, a relative's awkward question, but they no longer defined us. Therapy continued, now focused on forgiveness rather than survival. I wrote a letter to my father that I mailed without expecting a reply. The act itself brought closure. As the leaves began to fall again, we planned a quiet anniversary trip back to the cabin in Wisconsin where the journey had once felt overwhelming. This time the drive was filled with laughter and memories of how far we had come. The crisis had passed, but the growth continued. I was no longer the man who chose silence. I was the man who chose Leonardo every single day, and that choice had changed everything. The cabin looked exactly the same, but we were different. We hiked the same trails, cooked the same simple meals, and sat by the same fire pit talking about the year behind us. On the last night, Leonardo pulled out a small box and got down on one knee under the stars. "Kai Thompson, will you marry me?" The question wasn't a surprise, yet it still took my breath away. I said yes through happy tears, and we spent the rest of the night planning a small ceremony with the people who had stood by us. Back in Chicago, we told our closest friends first. Marcus cheered so loudly the neighbors probably heard. Leonardo's family threw an immediate celebration. My sister cried happy tears when I called her. Even my mother sent a text saying she was glad. Dad's silence remained, but I had made peace with it. The wedding planning became a joyful project filled with laughter and minor disagreements over flowers and music. We chose a simple venue by the lake with space for 50 people. As the date approached, I felt a deep sense of wholeness I had never known before coming out. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my tie when my sister knocked and handed me an envelope from my father. Inside was a short note. "I'm proud of the man you've become. I'll be there." He walked me down the aisle alongside my mother, tears in his eyes as he shook Leonardo's hand. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When the officiant pronounced us married, the applause from our chosen and biological family mixed together in a sound I would remember forever. The reception lasted late into the night with dancing, toasts, and stories that made everyone laugh and cry. Leonardo and I stole a quiet moment on the dock overlooking the water, hands clasped, watching the city lights reflect on the lake. "We made it," I whispered. He kissed me softly and replied, "And we're just getting started." The honeymoon in Hawaii was peaceful. Long walks on the beach, lazy mornings, and conversations about the future. We talked about adopting children someday, starting a college fund for the youth center kids, and simply living openly without apology. When we returned home, Max greeted us with excited barks, and the apartment felt like the beginning of forever. Months passed in a rhythm of work, family dinners that now included both sides, and quiet evenings where we simply existed together. My father still struggled with certain topics, but he showed up for holidays and asked about Leonardo's students. My mother baked cookies for our anniversary and called us her sons. The journey had transformed every relationship, including the one with myself. I no longer carried shame. I carried pride. Leonardo and I continued volunteering, mentoring young men who were just starting their own paths. Each time a teenager told us our story gave him hope, we remembered the night of the ultimatum and how one choice had rippled outward. The emotional growth never stopped. We still argued sometimes, still faced occasional prejudice, but we faced it together with tools we had earned. One quiet evening on our balcony, Max at our feet, Leonardo turned to me and said, "Thank you for choosing us." I smiled and answered, "Thank you for giving me the courage to choose." Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, honest, full, and deeply loved. The man who once hid in shadows now stood in the light, hand in hand with the person who had shown him the way. And that was the greatest story of all. True or false? Coming out is always the only way to have a truly authentic love in a same-sex relationship?